I want you to look at Matthew chapter 24. The Bible, specifically Jesus, actually speaks to these tendencies we see. The earthquakes, the moral landslide, the scheming, the fighting. All of that Jesus addressed. If you have your Bibles, and if you don't have one, you can turn to page 1538 in the blue Bible there in your pew. Page 1538. Matthew 24. Let's read through just a few verses here. I'll start down in verse 3. By the way, just to give you a little context, Jesus is about to die. And of course, he's talking about, we spent a good deal talking last week about his death and his resurrection. So there's already a lot of fear and anxiety and apprehension in the disciples. And so they're sitting on the Mount of Olives and they're wanting to know what's going to take place. This is right before the death of Jesus. Verse 3, Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives and the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Okay, there's the phrase of the month here. Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name claiming, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it you are not alarmed." There's one of the commands that Jesus gave, not to be afraid. "Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation." Well, we see that. "Kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are the beginning of birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. And you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come." Now, Jesus gave us this insight and amazing predictions. We'll talk about more of that in a moment, but very specific. It's as if we're watching the news as it's scrolling as we read through this Matthew chapter 24. But Jesus predicted this 2,000 years ago, and he said, this is what it's going to be like. And all of you who have had children, and especially you women who've had children, you'll relate to verse 8 there where we read, it's going to be like labor pains. Now, you remember when you first became pregnant, you probably didn't show for, a couple of months, maybe 2 to 3 months, and you begin to start noticing and showing and feeling different, and you had the ups and downs of the cycles of the 9 months, and by the time you got to the end, things just sort of got miserable in a hurry, didn't they? Do you remember putting on some of the extra weight and feeling, just bad all the time? And then the last couple of days, maybe you had early contractions. Maybe some of you had extended labor, 10, 12, 20, 24 hours or longer. And those last moments of labor are very intense. They're exponential compared to the rest of the 9 months. The 9 months was just sort of a quiet buildup, and then boom, the last couple of days, it gets intense and intense. Now, Jesus has been gone for 2,000 years. And he told the disciples, "I'm going to leave and I'm going to come back." And they said, "When are you coming back?" He said, "It's going to be like a woman giving birth." Basically, there'll be an extended amount of time to where there'll be peace, to where there'll be, not a lot of turmoil as we know it certainly today in comparison. But those last few moments before the return, and in comparison, we're looking at the last few years, seeing how these things intensify. Well, it's all what Jesus predicted, that things are going to get a bit worse before they get better. And Jesus actually addresses and gives us insight to comfort us, to help us to be ready. If you want to follow in your notes, and I've given you quite a bit of notes this morning, I just want to give you 3 actually basic concepts. We'll talk about those for a few moments. Number one, I want you to see that in this, number one, God is in complete control. Now stay open in Matthew. We're going to go back and forth to this, but I want to just look at a couple of verses. If you have it open, page 1538 and 39 there. When I look down at verse 24, just look at a couple of phrases there in verse 24. "See, I have told you ahead of time." Isn't that a statement of control? I'm in charge. I know what's going to happen, and I'm telling you in advance so you'll know, not only am I prepared, but I'm in control of this. Jump down to verse 35. "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." What he's saying is take everything you hear, because you're going to hear a lot of junk. You're going to be confused. You're going to be scared. You're going to wonder about your children and your grandchildren. And he said, listen, I've told you ahead of time, this is what's going to happen. Heaven and earth is going to pass away. My words will not. You listen to me and understand. And what he's telling us to do, just from the onset, is to filter everything we see and we hear through God's word. What did God have to say about it? What did Jesus tell us we needed to know? I put there, if you're following your notes, the follow-up to that. And he has given us clear prophecies. That's why he gave us prophecies, to prove that he is in control. That not only does he predict, but he controls and ensures the eventual outcome. He's given us prophecies to prove that he is in control, as well as prepare us, because he knew we would be afraid. He knew that we would be susceptible to deception, that even our own fear would cloud us and blind us if we were not careful how we face the future. The Bible has an amazing track record of prophecy. Now think for just a moment. No one really knows what the Mayans meant. Remember, the Mayans are the ones responsible for the 2012 hysteria. No one really knows clearly what they meant by a destructive end and a new beginning. Half of the people who follow the 2012 theory believe that it's just a shift in consciousness, that it's something moral or social in nature and not physical. The other half, who are scared to death about survival, who are saving up water bottles and canned food, are saying, no, everything is going to be destroyed. We need to get safe while we can. So they don't even agree on what the Mayans actually meant. They can't interpret it. They don't know what the Mayans meant. Nostradamus, who's been the last few hundred years, his names keep popping up. Nostradamus, if you've ever read any of his predictions, they are amazingly vague. I mean, they're just vague. It's almost like eventually you could find something to fulfill the prophecies, but they're so vague. It's kind of like horoscopes. Now, I don't know if you follow horoscopes. I kind of hope you don't, because to me the whole notion's a little silly. I mean, you look on there and it says, you're going to have a bad day at work. I'm thinking, really? That never happens? You know? Well, I did. I had a bad day at work. It was right. You know, a broken clock is right twice a day, you know. Okay? But when we read the Bible doesn't give the vague, that's going to be dark. The Bible is it's amazingly specific. Did you know that in Daniel chapter 2 and in Daniel chapter 9, just to give you an example, at that time when Daniel wrote these prophecies, Babylon was the world empire. A big guy by the name of Nebuchadnezzar was in charge of the whole world. And he had a bad dream. And Daniel interpreted the dream and said, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be a nation come up. It's going to be the Persians. The Persians are going to take over the world empire. Following the Persians are going to be the Greeks, and they're going to take over the world empire. Following them are going to be the Romans, and they're going to be the last world empire. They're going to be dormant, and then it's going to come back. That's another story and another message. But basically, the Bible predicts the four major world empires. The Babylonian, the Persian, the Greek, and the Roman empires. Amazing. Predicted it before it happened. Did you know that the exact day, this is amazing. I wish we had time to go into it. I almost did a couple of weeks ago. Maybe we'll save it for another time. But the exact day of the triumphal entry was predicted in Daniel chapter 9. To the day. Amazing specific prophecies. I mean, even just the prophecy of where the Messiah, Jesus, would be born in Bethlehem. You probably don't, you know about Bethlehem because of the songs, "O Little Town of Bethlehem." And that day, Bethlehem was just a little town. It's like Mayaka. That's like saying the next world leader is going to be born in Mayaka. And everybody's going, really? Mayaka? And they were like, Bethlehem? And Micah says, in Bethlehem, out of all the cities, the Messiah is going to come. Wow. Did you know that in the death of Jesus alone, we celebrated the death and resurrection of Jesus, there are at least 33 specific prophecies that were fulfilled by his death. From the amount of money by which he would be betrayed. Think about that. That he would have no broken bones. I mean, that's amazing, especially when we understand the brutal torture he endured, the beatings and the whippings and the being thrown on the cross and the manhandled, not a bone broken. That's an amazing prophecy. The Bible even prophesied that he would be pierced. I mean, over and over again, 33 specific prophecies in his death alone. Very specific, very adamant. And you know what? You are gathered in this room. It's probably one of the greatest and most undeniable prophecies of all time, where Jesus looked at Peter in Matthew 16 and he said, upon you I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. He reiterates in Matthew 24, we read it just a moment ago, the gospel is going to go around the world before the end comes. Here's this obscure man, moments from death, a carpenter from Galilee, looks at his disciples and said, the good news about me is going to be heard by everyone in the world before the end of time. And here we are 2,000 years later, this close to that being fulfilled. You're an amazing fulfillment of prophecy.